Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar via Zoom call and also on a Facebook live stream. Today is today is February 19. We have another one in March 19. That's why I'll get it to you as well. So we are here today on February 19th, 12 p.m. New York time. And my name is Emma Rakelian. I am the Armenian International Women Association United Nations Committee lead. On behalf of the Armenian International Women Association and as a member of UN Economic Social Council, IWA is delighted to welcome everyone to this powerful session about women in climate, from decision-making to financing. What a powerful title. And we'll get to another hour. We're going to talk more about that. This is our second of the year contribution to the Commission of the Women's Status 66 Committee associated with the UN. I'm happy to note that the third session is planned for March 19, which will run in parallel to the main UN CSW, which is Commission of Status of Women 66 sessions. Today, panel discussion is in support of the Commission on the Status Women Universal Theme of Empowerment of All Women and Girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction, policies and programs. I am honored to introduce you to our distinguished panel. Meet the panel moderator, Dr. Irina Hartunyan, who is the Senior Advisor on Climate Change with the World Bank Group. The panelists, Diana Hartunyan, Angela Melkonian, Astrine Pasoyan. I'm gonna let Irina to do the introductions further for the panelists. With that, let's start the session. The topic is Women in Climate, from decision-making to financing. Irina, take over.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's wonderful to be here again. Thank you so much for extending the invitation to moderate such an important event with such a timely and important topic, with such a stellar lineup of women. I want to first of all take the opportunity to thank the UN and of course the UN Women and the Armenian International Women's Association for putting this event together. And of course, I want to thank our panelists for being with us today to discuss these very timely topics. Before I introduce the content of our discussion today, I would like to introduce our panelists. So bear with me, as the biographies of our panelists are quite impressive. First of all, I'd like to introduce Diana Hartunyan. As Emma already said, she's the Climate Change Program Coordinator at UNDP Armenia. And she's one of the key experts in Armenian climate change. She is lead reviewer of national communications and biennial update reports under the UNFCCC International Assessment and Review process. For around 15 years, she's managing the climate change program of UNDP in Armenia, supporting the Ministry of Environment in executing the role as the national authority responsible for the UNFCCC implementation. The program under her management includes adaptation, mitigation, and policy-related projects. She coordinates the climate change national communications and biennial update reports preparatory work in Armenia, as well as preparation of Armenia's NDC documents under the Paris Agreement. As expert, she supported Armenia's delegation in more than 12 COPs, starting from COP6. She's a member of Kyoto Protocol Clean Development Executive Board, representing Eastern European UN Regional Group. Diana is also the author of several scientific articles and editor of publications on climate change. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for being with us. Our next panelist is Angela Melkonian. She has more than 10 years of experience in renewable energy industry with Manawa Market. She majored in mechanical engineering at the American University of Beirut and worked as field engineer for 3 years at Hilti in Qatar. Her passion for renewable energy moved her to Dubai to pursue her career in a specific field. She first worked as a business development manager at MENA for the Italian developer Building Energy and contributed to their winning of 250 megawatt solar projects in Egypt under the Feed on Tariff Program Round 1. She then joined the Spanish developer as business development and technical manager for over 3 years and contributed to the winning of the 800 megawatt DEWA 3 tender in Dubai, 55 megawatt in Armenia, and drove 3 50 megawatt solar projects in Jordan under the RAPE Round 3 to financial close. She's currently a senior project development manager Manawa at Scatec, the Norwegian developer, where she contributed to the winning of 300 megawatt in Tunisia under the first round of the concession regime in the country, and the winning of 525 megawatt solar EOO in Iraq. Angela is currently implicated on several projects and tenders among the programs in Iraq, Lebanon, Oman, and Mali. Welcome, Angela. Your private sector experience will be very, very valuable today in our panel discussion. And of course, Aswini Pasoyan, our third panelist, she's the director of the Energy Saving Foundation. She's an expert in sustainable energy policies, finance, project design, and capacity building with a multi-million project portfolio management experience for Central and Eastern European and CIS countries with over 20 years of experience. Ms. Pasoyan has managed energy efficiency, planning and legal reform efforts, market assessment, and identification of potential for promotion of energy efficiency and sustainable energy initiatives in various sectors of economy, managing capacity building, development of financing schemes for building energy efficiency investments, analysis of climate change mitigation potential, and investment climate for energy efficiency and renewable energy in many countries in transition, building energy certification and labeling policy, advocacy for EE in residential and public buildings, national and municipal energy planning, and public outreach. Wow, our three panelists are certainly very, very impressive, and I want to welcome everybody again. Our discussion today will be certainly very, very insightful considering the timeliness of both topics, gender mainstreaming in various sectors of the economy, and of course, climate change, which today, as you will see, most of the experts agree that it's not change anymore. We're referring to climate crisis because we are living through it, and Armenia is certainly one country that is experiencing it on a daily basis with climate change and warming temperatures affecting virtually every sector of the economy. So with this expert lineup, today's agenda will be to address three overarching questions: what, why, and how. The first focus of our panel discussion will address the question, do we have a female underrepresentation in the entire value chain of climate? If so, why is it a problem? And we will work towards defining this problem. The second focus of the panel will address the overarching question of why do we need more women in the entire value chain of climate? And the third and final focus of the panel will address the question of how do we solve this misrepresentation problem? Who needs to do what? The UN, governments, private sector, and civil society, and what is next? So without further ado, let me begin. And the way we will structure is in addressing every focus of today's panel, I will address questions to our panelists. Aswini, may I start with you? And my first question would be, data shows that women continue to be underrepresented in the entire value chain of climate, from decision-making to financing. This is evidently a problem. Could you break it down for us why? Could you granularly define the problem and explain how it keeps us further away from effectively addressing climate action? Aswini, please. We can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Yes, sorry. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on this panel with this distinguished and stellar women lined up. Yes, the problem is outstanding, and I like the term you use, granulating, because it actually is multifaceted. There's a lot of aspects to this. First of all, there's a very important gender dimension when you look at energy access and energy poverty. Women and children are most affected. And you look at sources they use and sustainability of these sources. That's another aspect, impact on health and well-being. The other issue is all the, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but all solutions we have for sustainable energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, they deal with finance and investment. And at least in Armenia, women have 60% less chance of getting a loan to invest in an energy upgrade or retrofit. Then there's decision-making aspect, the business aspect. Women are underrepresented in every circle of the decision-making chain. And as in every link where we need to push policies to make progress, the agenda related to these issues I mentioned, energy poverty, time poverty of women tied to unsustainable energy technologies they're linked to. These are issues that never make it to the policy agenda because nobody simply speaks about it. Women are underrepresented, or if there are, there's not enough voices to be heard compared to what the spread out is. This is certainly very socio-cultural. There's a lot of barriers that are related to particular country in mind. I brought the example of Armenia, but this is also the case in many other countries of the region. We also, even if I go further, we have underrepresentation of women in engineering professions, in energy professions, which are largely paving the pathway to sustainable climate solutions. And a lot of that is also linked to technical capacities, professions, and being represented in also crafting those technical solutions, but also then selling them, which is why I'm so happy to have Angela on board, because, this is the kind of, women we want to see in also not only the engineering background, but then making it to the business sector. Diana fighting on the international agenda for Armenia and being the local policy, also lobbyist yourself, Irina. You didn't read your bio, but it's easy to Google you on that agenda. So, the reason why there's so few people on this panel is because there are very few people that can actually answer these questions.
Thank you so much, Asenia. This was very good scoping exercise to showcase the overarching problem. And since you already called on Diana, I'm going to call on her as well. Diana, you have an incredible experience working in this sector for close to 2 decades. I'd love to hear your opinion on what is done on the global and local level to overcome the female underrepresentation in climate change, decision-making, and action. Diana, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The same, I would like to thank for this opportunity and to share my personal views on this issue, and also coming from my experience of 20 years being also participating as a delegate to see how negotiations move in that direction, and to say from 1994, that when the convention came in force, the mainly was dominated negotiation process, executive secretaries of this convention and constituent bodies were chaired and dominated by men. Now the situation is a bit changed in a positive direction. There is around 33% of women in constituent bodies. Women are underrepresented in the Kyoto Protocol CDM executive board, 10% only. Proud to say that this 10% is due to Eastern European group who gave chance to me to be in the board. So that is the situation. But this situation was usually in UN system, the women are encouraged. And this came up in all decisions. But just from 2014, with the Lima Gender Action Plan, this was formulated as a decision with all directions which are encouraging parties to the convention and also elective bodies to consider that the women must be presented in all bodies to come to this equality of women, 50% of population in the world. So at least we have to reach this objective of this. So now in this year in June, there will be interim revision of this Lima Action Plan and program, and to see what are the results. But from even viewing, being in negotiations, these panels and seeing how delegates this landscape is changing, I can say that now UN is bringing a lot of women to this process, and this is making completely different also the discussions around, because the women are bringing this sensitive approach for the impact of the climate change to the most vulnerable and marginalized population. And here is coming women and children. And here is coming also importance of considering not only to look on the decisions taken from the perspective of their impact on women, but also to give a chance to the women in leadership. And here is coming this paradigm from where these decisions are bringing to the qualitative change. And this qualitative change is possible when there is encouragement and there is conditions and there are given the right to speak and the right to take a decision. And I can proudly say that in last COP26, Armenian delegation has more youth and more women inside, and it's good that the first time the UNFCCC focal point is female representative of the government, and this is bringing also importance to these delegates who came back from Glasgow. These young ladies are now most enthusiastic and understand the importance and how these all issues were so much importance was given in this convention. Now they have a lot of ideas, and we will try to help them to implement these ideas in the climate change program for UNDP projects. And also one good thing that we have helped to establish the Climate Change Council in 2021. And it is 53% of these council members who are on level of deputy ministers are women. In working groups, 3 working groups are established, and here we have around 80% are women. So this middle level is usually women are dominating in Armenia. But besides this, we are trying to make, there is a gender council established in 2019 in Armenia. Now this council have a working plan, and one of these working plan items we push to be the climate change. So this will bring this bridging between gender issues, which is managed by the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs and Ministry of Environment, which is responsible for the climate change related policy and coordination in Armenia. So these 2 councils, if they will work together, I think that we can have some changes in at least on a level of decision making.
Thank you so much, Diana. I think everyone is jealous that you had an opportunity to visit 12 COPs. We had an opportunity, and here I'm speaking on behalf of the American University of Armenia, the Akopyan Center for the Environment. We had the opportunity to have 3 students this year join the delegation to COP. And it certainly changed their lives, because seeing the dynamics and the sheer size of what happens during the conferences of parties to the UNFCCC convention gives especially the youth the understanding of the commitment of the global community to take action. So absolutely, you're right. Participation in COPs has been very, very fruitful, particularly for the youth. And we were happy that we had 1 male and 2 female students join the Armenian delegation this year and have a firsthand experience of what really COPs are about. Thank you so much for that very useful insight. Now I want to move to Angela to provide us with a private sector perspective. Angela, how is the female representation in the clean energy industry from a private company's perspective? Angela, please give us your insight. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to take part in this panel discussion and this initiative by Iowa. So it's clear that women are underrepresented in the clean energy industry, same as in other male-dominated fields such as engineering, but also finance, IT, software development, piloting, construction, manufacturing, so on. Women account for 32% only in the renewable energy field, with fewer women reaching senior roles in the energy sector than in the broader economy. So why is this a problem? The answer is twofold, and as Brine actually covered the first section of this, Studies show that women are more likely than men to be affected by climate change. UN figures actually indicate that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. And these are from poor countries who are the first impacted by climate change. Countries like Pakistan, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Central African Republic, so on. Roles as primary caregivers and providers of food make them more vulnerable when flooding and drought occur. Plus, disasters do not affect all people equally. After the 2004 tsunami, a report found that surviving men outnumbered women by almost 3-to-1 ratio in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and India. While no one cause was clear, there were similar patterns across the region. Men were more likely to be able to swim, and women lost precious evacuation time trying to look after children and other relatives. In addition, besides climate change and climate disasters, speaking of access to energy, energy poverty is also not gender neutral. Evidence shows that women disproportionately bear the burden of energy poverty. So naturally speaking, it is only fair to say that women should be involved in the climate change industry and in its decision-making to put in place policies and investment decisions that protect them, since the repercussions impact them the most. So this is speaking globally on a human values level and the protection of the most vulnerable, which are women and children. On the other side, if we zoom into the corporate world, despite making up 50% of the population, women generate just 37% of the GDP. And this varies a lot, of course, between country to country. So if we look into studies carried out on gender diversity in work environments, we see there is a strong correlation linking gender diverse work environments and gender diverse boards to improved company performance. Women are key drivers of economic and social growth. And according to studies, positive improvements can be seen in any industry, and I list them, in increased sales return, customer retention, customer satisfaction, in having a wider talent pool and multiplicity of perspectives, and enhanced collaboration, and improved staff retention, and an improved recruitment and reputation, since a reputation as an inclusive employer will also demonstrate your positive company values, and that will enhance as well your reputation in the recruitment marketplace. So the companies who are not encouraging women to join them are missing out on all these benefits and are not tapping into the full potential of having a gender diverse work environment.
Thank you so much, Angela. These numbers and statistics are extremely useful in putting our argument forward. I want to now focus on the second question of today's discussion. So we've established now that there is a problem. Women are severely underrepresented in the entire value chain of climate, from decision-making to access towards finance that's available out there. So now let's address the question, why do we need more women in the entire value chain of climate? What is the additionality that women bring to the table? What do women bring to the table to begin with? And why do they need to be equally represented at the decision-making and at the receiving end? And also, since our panelists have both Armenia specific and global specific experience, I would like you all to reflect on that in particular. So with no specific order, let me pick Diana to answer this question. Please share your practical experience from climate change related project. What value are women bringing in the process? Diana, over to you.
Thank you. The climate change in a negotiation process and in a convention document is strongly linked to justice and equity. And here is coming that from my experience looking on civil society organizations or environment civil society organizations in Armenia, the women-led NGOs are stronger and better advocates and fighters, real soldiers for defending the rights of communities when there are these public hearings for the installations or mining and such type. They are more strong, more courageable to fight for justice. And it's coming maybe from the nature, because women are nurturing their future of their kids and more sensitive for the future conditions, healthy conditions for their, maybe it's biological feature, but I think it's very important to consider that men like risky investments, risky and more short-term gains and risk, and women are more conservative and looking for more risk mitigation and more conservative in changing something. And here is coming that this balance must be that somebody have to be the icebreaker and another must be somehow protector. And that's why the balance of women in any decision making is important. From climate change perspective, when we was looking for figures who understand, as Angela brought examples about vulnerability, we saw in Armenia that there is climate change impact on agriculture when if the traditional methods in agriculture are used, it's more vulnerable to the climate change because the changing conditions are not considered. And so the men in farmers took loans which were not so much well valued the risk, and the women don't have the rights to the tenure of the land, so there was no decision makers in this loan taking and giving as a guarantee fund the land as a cost. And so they lost their income, they lost the opportunity to pay for the loan, and in the end they lose these poor farms lose their last asset, the land. So these are the things that when the women will have the similar equal right for decision making, this vulnerability of the women under the climate change will be mitigated. And when we are looking from the global perspective in the gender inequality, the main issue is brought education, which is not the case for Armenia, because we know that for education, we have equal figures for women and men. We have even higher education, the number of females are more than men. But if we are looking on the positions which in the companies, in the government, it's mainly men dominated these positions. So here is coming the some perception in the society for the women, which must build alliances. And I am very glad that who organized this event is Armenian Association of Women. So this the women have to join hands and lobby and encourage others. And so we are trying, and the panelists and you, Irina, is showing the example that with this, we are encouraging young people that they can take leadership, they can take active role. And my last impression from the one event organized by women-led NGO was on education. And this, through these sessions of education about energy efficiency, and these kids were presenting their small projects, and it was interesting that a lot of girls said, first we was thinking to take such profession of teacher, and now we want to take engineering profession. Because of course, these are after education, you have also to show application areas. If you will, if they will see that there are job opportunities and there are women who are active in this engineering field, they can understand that they have chance also to grow. So the examples and encouragement is very important plus to education. Only education is not enough.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Diana. And you're making some very important points there, such as, for example, that women do carry more fiscal responsibility when it comes to lending. And that's a very strong argument because for us to ensure that climate finance access is done through gender equity prism, because as we know, women are disproportionately affected by climate change. So thank you so much for vocalizing that important argument. Astrid, I want to move next to you and ask, because you've had such a wealthy experience in various countries and different regions. What is your experience with countries' practices in gender mainstreaming in climate? And can you share some success stories, if any, where you had seen this happen effectively? Asane.
Thank you. Actually, in my head, I often compare the climate change. It's no longer climate change. I mean, we are referring to it as the climate crisis. So in my head, I often refer to the situation when this post-Soviet and the whole Warsaw Pact fell apart, and the countries of Eastern Europe and CIS gained independence. It was crisis. And this is when I was starting my career. And a lot of what I observed in the, 23, 25 countries that I routinely work in, people who persevered, people who are flexible enough to have the perception to change, get up, pick up a new profession, read more literature, broaden their horizons, look at issues in an interdisciplinary, multifaceted manner, were predominantly women. I had a lot of superiors, my colleagues from the US, that every time they would travel to, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, Ukraine, they would say, you know what, we are very comfortable and confident about the future of this region because Eastern European women will save the day. And this is not something I said. And I've seen these women with linguistic education, background in teaching or legal perspective backgrounds, come into this sector, sustainability, sustainable energy, climate change mitigation, pick up the financial lectures, the engineering background, and become big lobbyists and change makers and pioneers in this domain. And I can name some of them because you would know, but then it will be a long list because we've got many countries. Another important thing is, and this goes in everywhere. I mean, again, if you look at what happened when economies, started coming down, people lost their jobs and money. There was a period of depression, but women quickly picked up other professions and found their place. While we observed for men, it took so much longer to adapt to the new market realities. But in general, this it has a broader application because again, from my experience, if I ask any students, and for 20 years, I've had about 100, 120 students a year, every time I ask them before I explain to them what disaster management is, I ask them, do you have a person at home who would tell you what to do if you're out of water, electricity, heat, something goes wrong and you have a crisis, basically? Who would step up and tell you what to do, where the candles are, where to get backup water? And they go, Mom, Mom is the disaster manager. And climate is a disaster. Climate change is the disastrous crisis. And women from the level of a regular family are the better disaster management people because that's the way their brains operate. They're always having backups. They're always working on scenarios of how things could go wrong. And this can be looked at from the way their heads operate in an interdisciplinary manner, but also how they're from childhood are trained to be multitaskers. What I want to talk about, however, is the courage that Ms. Hartunyan mentioned. Indeed, we've observed that women have the courage to oppose, not only they have the courage to come up with a good agenda, but also step up and speak against government, ruling parties, political pressures, and basically oppose wrongdoing because they're not afraid to lose their job because what they could lose is something that affects their children, next generation. So all this, our regular vocabulary about sustainable development and, affecting next generations, giving them adequate access to resources. For some people, it's theory. For every mother, it's a daily job, and they are tuned and structured. Their brains are wired to think about that 24/7. And last, but it's not last, but not least, but I also mentioned this before with my colleague, Nunes Sarkanyan. We worked on a study of how unsustainable energy practices affect women in many ways, from health to poverty. But what really threw me off is how time poor they are. You know, all the household responsibilities and all the duties that are related to household chores, cooking and washing and bathing children. When you're not living in a modern energy access world, that means you're spending between 4 to 6 hours on tedious household chores simply because you don't have decent electricity or decent heating options. And that creates prerequisites for all the other problems that Angela mentioned. I mean, they don't get the right education, they don't have access to good, gainful employment, that kills their credit history, and that covers their access to finance. And not only they don't have the profession, they don't have the money. And how do we put them on the political agenda so that they're heard? These are all very interrelated. So
Thank
their
you.
ability is to also work on themselves, excel, and not only be heard, but actually have something meaningful to say is also tied to sustainable energy limitations. Thank you.
These are some very, very important points to take away, particularly the time poverty, especially in those communities where women don't have access to modern technology. And of course, your very poignant definition about women being disaster risk managers by default. Absolutely couldn't agree more with you. Angela, let me move on to you with a question again specific to your very wealthy background in private sector. What is women's value add in complex project management and then importantly in leadership? Angela, please.
So I will complement what already Astrine and Diana mentioned. So it's been proven that there is a strong correlation between high emotional intelligence among leaders of a business and better company results. And I will elaborate why this is relevant to this question. According to research, women show particular ability for cultivating self-awareness and environmental awareness in their daily lives, skills they've developed over the centuries out of pressure and necessity, but which can nevertheless help them achieve success. This entails an enhanced collaboration, innovation, and creativity within the group. And I explain, having women on teams can help improve team processes and boost group collaboration. Researchers have observed that women have stronger skills in reading non-verbal cues and body language. They also conclude that groups with more women were better at taking turns in conversation, which helps them make the most of the group's combined knowledge, skills, and talents, leading to more innovation and creativity. This will benefit groups when they're collaborating on projects face-to-face, and it will also help when employees use modern business communication tools like we are now doing on Zoom. But to talk beyond this, according to a new research by Korn Ferry, the preeminent global people and organization advisory firm, women score higher than men on nearly all emotional intelligence competencies, except emotional self-control, where no gender differences are observed. Data from 55,000 professionals across 90 countries and all levels of management were collected between 2011 and 2015. And it was found that women more effectively employed emotional and social competencies correlated with effective leadership and management than men. In fact, when assessing the competency levels of both men and women across the 12 key areas of emotional and social intelligence, Korn Ferry research found that the greatest difference between men and women can be seen in emotional self-awareness, where women are 86% more likely than men to be seen as using this competence consistently. Women are 45% more likely than men to be seen as demonstrating empathy consistently. The smallest margin of difference is seen in positive outlook. Women are only 9% more likely to exhibit this than men. Other competencies in which women outperform men are coaching and mentoring, influence, inspirational leadership, conflict management, organizational awareness, adaptability, like Astrine mentioned, teamwork and achievement orientation. Emotional self-control is the only competency in which men and women showed equal performance. And I stress on this because we hear a lot that women are getting emotional at work, but we don't hear the same about men. But studies show we use this competency equally. So the data suggests a strong need for more women in the workforce to take on leadership roles if these organizations want to achieve better business results. So these companies must find ways to identify women who score highly on these competencies and to empower them.
Thank you so much, Angela. This is some very strong and powerful statistics and numbers that you're bringing, making our arguments that much more stronger. And I certainly hope that men that are tuning into this conversation or will be hearing this recording later do not feel intimidated, because we are coming in the age of leadership that is valued for its empathy and ability to listen. Women certainly are taking more leadership roles, and I hope to see that across the world, and particularly in developing countries where that type of leadership is very much in need indeed. Now that we have established that there is a problem in the entire value chain of climate, of misrepresentation of women, why this is a problem, I want to move to last focus of our panel discussion. How do we solve this? How do we solve this misrepresentation? Who needs to do what? The UN, governments, private sector, civil society. What is next for all of us in achieving a better representation and making sure that we have strong gender equity in the entire value chain of climate? So let me move on to Deanna. Deanna, how do we ensure successful advocacy for women's inclusion? Who is best our partner? And how do we move from numbers and percentages to real deal makers? Diana, please.
Also coming from my experience, that all actors are important. So first of all, the requirements for women quota, which we put in our governmental decree for this council, worked somehow. Because we also similarly, when there is coming from UN decisions for the climate change related issues or projects, it's the gender marker is very critical and important. Now all the UNFCCC financial instruments, GF, Green Climate Fund, and requesting the gender action plan in the funding proposal for projects. So it means that financing scheme is pushing you to think from gender perspective, and you have to look behind the figures. For example, when we were preparing energy efficiency project for street lighting energy efficiency, we start to think from different perspective, how it is affecting gender. And we understood that security on the roads, security as a pedestrians is very important for women in the evening to go out to be in a social life, so they are secure in the better illuminated streets. Similarly, when we was planning energy efficiency project in buildings, for us, this gender marker is important because the women are mainly staying at home with kids, and they are very important that under heated apartments, with the reason of the suppressed demand because the energy is expensive and these poor insulated buildings need more energy. It's the women are most suffering people, so the main direction for help must go to the multi-kid family or the women-led households to be supported by the grant amounts, while other the apartment owners, when they are men-led, can finance their insulation works. So these are pushing when you from this perspective to look on your work. You are finding this vulnerability of women, and also when we started to work with the households on their participation in this project, women are more eager to energy efficiency measures, because usually in Armenian families, the women are looking for the budget, how it's spent for utilities, so they value the energy efficiency more than men. And also looking for developments in Armenia with solar water heating systems installations, which even for poor villages now, we see that they are eager to take these reduced loans for these solar water heaters. The women are the most lobbyist in their family to take these loans for installation of water heaters, because these are, as Astrini mentioned, is making their life more comfortable. and more sanitary conditions better. Another issue, when we looked for school systems, school buildings improvement, we discovered that even with, we are proud saying we have universal education systems, everybody can attend schools, but in a lot of villages, the schools don't have running water, and which means that sanitary conditions are not good. So the school renovation project take in consideration that there must be water, sanitation conditions must be equally important as school building renovation. So all these are pushing that decisions on all levels are important. When UN is imposing what that financial instruments are requesting that gender must be considered, till you are beginning to think for your actions from gender perspective, you are planning better. And here is coming that also is very important that we started last years to collect climate change related disaggregated statistics. And from these statistics, you can draw a lot of analysis and understandings what can be done with women and for women. So here is one more example I can bring from climate change perspective, how, who can do, and bring one example of one also women-led NGO where 10, 12 years ago, the UN gender support project was planned, and they was asking who can do this project better. So my proposal was for this NGO, and now I'm very proud that this NGO is doing great work with advocacy and extending extension service for agriculture and women in agriculture with climate change related new technologies, new varieties to use and to bring them to market. And there are installed this type of centers in some regions of Armenia and Yerevan, training centers, and specially oriented to help women farmers to build some small businesses from production to processing the food. And they are successful, they are bringing income, and this is making them important also in their family. And these are village people, and this means that we can have a value chain, we can ensure food security, but make them also resilient to the climate change, because they know knowledge, they have tools, they have mentors who help them, and there are also financial opportunities through this support schemes by climate change funds. So these are, I mean that this whole chain must be in place.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana. These are very important points that you're bringing up, particularly the empowerment of rural population and rural women. And of course, the very poignant points about making sure that gender mainstreaming becomes a process that is owned by countries, right? That gender mainstreaming is not viewed as another hook that international communities imposing on developing countries to jump through, but to really understand the additionality and added value of gender mainstreaming, particularly when it comes to environmental and climate-related projects, as we have been talking about it for the past 45 minutes. Let me move on to Asline. Asline, you represent development world, and you've worked with civil society, with United Nations organizations, with the private sector. Give us a breakdown of what would be your take on what various stakeholders that I just mentioned must do to ensure female representation, whether it's decision-making or the receiving end of climate and climate finance. Asline, please.
Well, certainly empowerment is important, but I personally am against giving power without giving the tools, because power, when it's empty, it doesn't really serve to good use. And then, with all the 25 years of working in this sector, I've been working as a lecturer. I've been teaching as my hobby for more than 20 years, because I believe in the power of education. And I'm not just talking about educating young female engineers or policymakers or diplomats or business women, but educating educators. I mean, let's It's the value chain is in every aspect of this. A mother that is teaching her children how long of showers to take, how to brush their teeth, how much to keep the hot water running, how long to stand in front of the refrigerator with an open door browsing for, what the kid wants for snack. These are the things that are in the power of women, including what temperature to set at home, or how to influence her husband's decision of buying a refrigerator or making it a joint decision. So education is in every side of the story, top down and horizontally. So we want to really empower them with the knowledge, to help them do the right upbringing of the children, that make the right lifestyle choices and have the sustainable behaviors from childhood, and be the right citizens for a future climate resilient society. But on the other hand, of course, getting to the more technical, more, being aware of what financing is, what financing products they can or cannot afford, how to access finance. That's the side of education. Diana already mentioned gender informed and gender sensitive policies, and we do need these indicators. These are incredibly important, and these are quite vague in many countries where I work. Every donor, every client, every IFI, every partner I have work in different projects, different countries, they want the gender aspect. But if you get into the details of it, these are quite abstract. There's not much you can wrap your mind around. And unless you really have your own story coming in to break down the indicators, we had a case in Russia where literally every partner in Russia refused that gender indicator was relevant. And when we asked them why, because they say we are equal rights and equal opportunities, women have the same education. Well, when you tell them the story of how, inside the household, inside the, residential or even chores or aspects of being home versus being outside, that never occurred their mind or their ability to access finance. And then that even includes policies in education. The example that was mentioned earlier about more women drowning in floods. Yes, they do take more time to take care of the children properly and getting out of the house. But one of the most ironic observations is less girls are taught to swim. They didn't know how to swim. I mean, let's look at the irony of that statistic. So fathers don't teach their daughters to swim because it's a taboo, them appearing in a swimming suit. But there's a lot of social cultural aspect to it. So I don't know, it's a little ironic to say that empowerment includes learning to swim, learning to practice resilient agriculture, to be able to tap into your own sustainable energy solutions. And one of the important empowerment tools are actually coalitions. Diana mentioned women-led NGO, the Women for Climate and Energy, was our attempt to bring women together and let them help each other. Because some of those that make it to the top, or halfway to the top, or getting enough confidence and power to be able to do their job and make a difference, those should be lending a helping hand and pulling the younger females who may or may not have role models in their community, in their family, around them, in their school. And I think this is important. We created a coalition of CSOs for sustainable and transparent energy. We've got 25 NGOs there. Most of them are women-led. NGOs are women-led. So let's now push that same representation into finance, and women get less than 40% access to finance, sometimes even less than that. That way we may be able to nurture and cultivate change makers and pioneers, more of them.
Thank you so much, Askane. I think you brought some very insightful examples of how diverse empowerment can be. Thank you so very much. And now, last, I want to move to Angela. Angela, please give us your perspective. How can the private sector integrate more women, and in which roles, please?
Thank you, Irina. So my answer to this is a bit long because it's a complex social dilemma, and I will try to elaborate it, and I will repeat some of the things that Astrine and Diana already mentioned. So we should tackle both the root cause of this problem and then the effect, because having less women in the workforce is the effect of a deeper lingering cause present since our childhood, the way we were brought up, and the ideologies our caregivers and our cultural environment reflected on us and programmed our minds in terms of expectations. The fact that gender differences in career are paradoxically highest in the more gender egalitarian societies, like the Scandinavian countries, where they have implemented policies to promote gender inclusive workforce, shows that you cannot solve this puzzle on the surface when the problem arises, but you need to implement deeper reforms to change the gender essentialist ideologies arising from our childhood years. It is interesting to see this disparity more pronounced in these gender egalitarian societies. And the reason is likely to be because in these societies, more women are able to enter the workforce in their chosen profession. So this difference is more accentuated in these gender egalitarian countries. So to solve the root cause of these gender essentialist ideologies, the solution is to start very early from the home and the parental education. Girls should be taught that there are no stereotypes when it comes to career choices, and both girls and boys have the same cognitive skills. Studies suggest that men and women on the whole possess an equal aptitude for math and science. In fact, boy and girl infants were found to perform equally well as young as 6 months on tasks that underlie mathematical abilities. So the researchers conclude that early experience, educational policies, and culture strongly affect success in math and science. This is called the self-fulfilling prophecy in psychology. When a child is told you are a genius in math, you will be an engineer, and they end up being that from hearing it repeatedly and then believing it. Whereas girls might hear a different gender-biased rhetoric. If males and females were truly understood to be intellectual equals, things would change drastically in schools and universities, then in industries, and then in the workplace. So now if I move to solving the effect of this gender-biased ideology, which means women's misrepresentation in the renewable energy industry, there are 3 levels that are needed to enhance women's inclusion. And they are in the following sequence, and Diana tapped upon it. First, and naturally, non-governmental organizations and think tanks in collaboration with governmental agencies need to create the awareness on the presence of this gender gap, such as IWA, the International Labour Organization, Women's Environment and Development Organization. These agencies partner up with like-minded organizations and individuals and engage in advocacy to affect policy processes to ensure women's human and work rights are voiced. Then the second layer is the governmental policy level. Affected by these agencies, governments can design and implement policies that promote a future of work that is gender responsive by design and is anchored in social justice and decent work principles. And by this, I don't only refer to women inclusion in the renewable energy sector, but also to equal pay policies for both men and women. On top of this, governments could and should introduce an equal threshold of having women on the boards of companies and thus involved in decision-making, like the Norwegian quota reform that introduced the 40% threshold in 2005. Last but not least, the final layer is the layer who will execute these policies on the ground and realize these ambitions set by the NGOs, think tanks, and the governmental policies. And these are the institutions and the private companies who not only need to hire more women, but to provide equal pay and also to empower them. So all these previous efforts funnel down to implementing clear HR KPIs and management KPIs across the entire value chain to empower these women in the different roles. Another very, very important aspect beyond recruiting women is women employees' retention in these companies. Studies show that both men and women have indeed mentors inside the organizations. And by this, I will refer to what Astrine mentioned, empowering them. It's not just empowering them by messages, but you need to give them the right tools. Both men and women are provided mentors, but did you know that only men are provided sponsors inside the company. Many women explain how mentoring relationships have helped them understand themselves, their preferred styles of operating and ways they might need to change, etc. So they are given operational and technical skills, but men only tell stories about how their bosses and informal mentors have helped them plan their next moves and take charge in new roles, in addition to endorsing their authority publicly. This is key for internal promotions and feeling appreciated inside your company, a key element for employee retention and to move into senior and decision-making positions in the workplace, a thing that female employees are not having, probably because of man-to-man bonding inside the companies. Another way also to make the work environment more gender-friendly is to extinguish all sorts of gender-biased opinions, be it conscious or unconscious, and that by not only implementing clear company policy against discrimination, but also to make tailored awareness workshops to all employees to give examples of gender-biased treatments that can be overlooked easily. There should be also a whistleblowing mechanism in the corporate governance where a discriminated employee can channel grievances in this regard in order to improve such behaviors in the company. So the answer to this question is multifaceted, and the solution is spread on different layers, starting from the way men and women are programmed in their childhood, all the way to college degree and career choices, and last but not least, in being hired and retained in a gender inclusive company who is actively striving to eliminate all persisting gender biases along its value chain.
Angela, thank you so much for such a powerful and passionate response to a very important question. And I hope that those who are tuning in from private sector were taking notes, because these are some very strong recommendations. And as we know, unfortunately, in private sector, we have more expressed women underrepresentation, especially when it comes to energy sector and energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I want to stress something that both you and Aswin brought up, and those are coalitions that are largely unseen but strongly existent throughout various organizations, and men certainly benefit from those. And not women so much. So we need to start building stronger coalitions. We have completely run out of time. So I don't know if we have questions. I will defer to Emma if we have time for questions or not. Just one perhaps. Emma? I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
We can go ahead with one question by all means. We can have 3 more minutes.
There's one question in the chat, and it is the following. What laws have been implemented in Armenia for climate change that other countries can take example? Perhaps I would address that question to Diana, and maybe Astane, if you would like to contribute shortly.
So from climate change, I think it's not very, we are not very original, but we have already pushed one very important legal act, which is national determined contributions, when Armenia took very strong target for 2030 to reduce emissions by 40% compared to 1990. And these are ambitious target, and there is also this building this energy interagency, interministerial cooperation. This is also by governmental decree, and most importantly for Armenia as a vulnerable country for climate change is the National Adaptation Plan was approved in 2021, and now this year the sectoral adaptation plans will be adapted for agriculture, for health, for energy, and for water, and for tourism. And these are the most selected vulnerable sectors, and these decrees will plan actions and will help to understand how to deal and make resilient that sectors, but also in total the country from its pressures from the climate risks. So these are the last developments in the legal field.
Thank you.
And most importantly, also the public green procurement, which is for free items which have to be procured by the government, have to obey to the minimum energy standards. So it is very important. And this is the last developments.
Thank you, Diana. Asune, Angela, if you have nothing else to add, let me conclude. I want to echo what Diana just said. I think Armenia's NDCs are quite ambitious, and this makes me remember the words of Secretary General Antonio Guterres uttered at COP24. He said, "No country is too small to make a difference." That really stuck to me. And I think Armenia certainly showed in its NDCs that despite being 0.02% of global emissions, it is stepping up with its ambitious plan to reduce and mitigate climate risk and climate change. So
and allow me to also thank you, because you lead this process when you was a deputy minister, and you lead this process, and we prepared this document under your leadership, and thank you for this leadership in 2020.
Thank you so much, Diana, really humbled with that. I want to thank all of our panelists. I think it was a very incredible lineup, has shown the force of climate ambition on the part of Armenia and shown the force of Armenian women. Thank you, ladies, so very much. And Emma, thank you so much for your gracious hosting. Over to you.
Absolutely, ladies. This was a very passionate and very informative session. We got a lot of feedback as the session was going on Facebook and here on this webinar. As I mentioned earlier, thank you for Irina getting this panel together, and Iowa International and Iowa UN team was proud to have you. And we're going to have the next session on March 19th. Everyone mark your calendars, more information to come on this topic. Thank you, and until next time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.